There's a difference between horror that scares you and horror that scars you. Because disturbing isn't just about gore or jump scares, it's about the kind of film that lingers. The kind you don't recommend lightly, the kind that makes you question if you should even be watching. Sometimes it's violence, sometimes it's the story, sometimes it's the fact that it really happens, or sometimes it's the feeling that the filmmaker went too far. So join me as I dive into movies that have defined what it means to truly disturb, across time, across countries, across different corners of the horror world, from psychological trauma to moral collapse to films so extreme they've been banned, censored, or outright hidden. You'll recognise a few names, others you may wish you hadn't discovered, but all of them, in one way or another, have burned themselves into horror history and into the minds of the people who dared to watch them. So let's talk about it. The most disturbing horror movies ever made. And hey, if you want a movie that really says something disturbing about the human condition, you shouldn't look any further than Salo or the 120 Days of Sodom. Sure, this isn't the first video to mention this movie in this kind of setting, and it won't be the last. This is a movie that horror fans mention like a dare, a film so brutal, so transgressive, it's become a kind of unholy rite of passage. Directed by Italian author Pier Paolo Pasolini, and based on the writings of Marquis de Sade, set during the final days of fascist Italy, Salo follows a group of elite libertines who have captured and abused a group of teenagers and subject them to systematic abuse over the course of 120 days. The film shows us humiliation, mutilation, and degradation in long, unblinking shots. One of the most talked about sequences involves a literal feast of human shit. Not played for shock, but ritualized. Another involves forced sexual violence staged as a performance. There's executions, beating, and endless psychological games, and every moment is framed like an art house film. That's the part of what makes it so hard to process. What unfolds is methodical, dehumanizing, and cold, not just in its violence, but in its message. Unlike others in this disturbing subgenre that could be argued are there just to shock, this is perhaps the most sophisticated of the bunch. The graphic nature of the film comes from the massive balls of Pasolini in making a powerful and everlasting film on fascism, which he thought was destroying humanity through inherent evil. And somehow, Salo isn't the furthest quote-unquote cinema has gone, because the next film doesn't come wrapped in political allegories or art house framing. No, this next one is straight up depravity. Yeah, we're talking about M.D. Pope, or the most disturbed person on planet Earth. Yeah, not really even a movie, it's a mixtape, a compilation of the most shocking and horrifying clips ever captured on video, curated in a way that's meant to push viewers to the brink of their sanity. There's little plot or narrative structure here. M.D. Pope is more of an endurance test than a traditional movie. The film, if we can even call it that, is notorious for its unfiltered, raw depictions of violence, depravity, and human suffering. This thing is a digital hell scroll, featuring scenes that I'm gonna mention now, but we'll have to censor to save us from the YouTube overlords. Autopsies, animal, uncensored, and that's just the real stuff. The rest is a grab bag of fetish underground horror. The thing was never released commercially, it spread through private torrents, invite-only forums, and dark web whispers. Passed around like a cursed VHS tape for the internet generation. Watching it isn't entertainment, it's a challenge. Yet, it exists. In fact, it's a trilogy, with each one claiming to be more and more extreme than the last, but honestly it all just kind of ends up feeling like something for cringy edgelords, a compilation of rot. If you search this one out, you might need Jesus. But if you do survive the shock of that, perhaps you'll be ready for more of a slow burn that'll haunt you for days. Because not every disturbing film screams in your face, no, some deliver them with a whisper. Just like red, white and blue, that doesn't come for your stomach, it comes for your soul. Now technically this isn't even really a horror movie, at least not in the traditional sense, but it's one of the bleakest films I've ever seen. And if horror is about showing us the ugliest parts of the human condition, this one qualifies on sheer emotional violence alone. Released in 2010 and directed by Simon Rumley, it follows Erica, played with raw, heartbreaking vulnerability by Amanda Fuller, a drifting, self-destructive woman numbing her trauma through emotionless sex with strangers, and you can feel it from the start. Something is broken inside of her, but the film never really tells you what. It just shows you quietly, miserably. Then we meet Nate, a former military guy played by Noah Taylor. Awkward, intense, definitely not right. But they form this weird sort of fragile bond, and just as it starts to feel like something human is happening, the film pulls the rug out. Because this isn't a love story, it's a trap. The third act hits like a pipe wrench on the chest, shifting into revenge horror that is as methodical as it is soul-crushing. And yeah, there's a skinning scene that is brutal as hell, but honestly, in this movie it's not the gore that wrecks you. What sticks with you is how miserable every single person in this story is. Everyone is carrying pain, everyone's lying, manipulating, using one another. There's malicious sexual behaviour, broken masculinity, cycles of exploitation, and the scariest part, these people feel real. You've met versions of them, you've been them. This isn't fun, it's not cathartic, it's bleak, it's punishing. And if you're not prepared for a full-on emotional drain, you may want to skip this, but if you are, it's perhaps one of the most rewarding, soul-crushing watches you'll ever sit through. But yeah, if Red, White and Blue quietly ruined your faith in people, then Atroz is here to stomp on the ashes. Directed by Lex Ortega, this 2015 Mexican found footage nightmare is often brought up in the same breath as a Serbian film. Yeah, and there's a reason to this. This is one of the nastiest, cruelest, and most viscerally disturbing films I've ever seen. It starts with a car crash. Police find a camcorder in the wreckage, and what's on the tape? It's a catalogue of human depravity. Prepare yourself, and I'm not saying that lightly, for extreme brutality, castration, breast removal. It's disgusting, and it's not for the faint of heart, let me tell you that. The violence doesn't let up, it's constant, relentless, and it's filmed in such a raw, claustrophobic way that it kind of feels real, almost too real. And that's perhaps what's most disturbing, just how convincing this all is. Here's the thing about this one, this isn't gore for gore's sake. Ortega isn't trying to make some fun slasher, he's trying to vent something. This movie has a plot, and there's kind of a twist, but it's really about cycles of abuse, about machoism, about repression, and how a country soaked in systematic violence turns people into monsters. There's a moment involving forced feminization and psychological torture that's just... you don't forget it. Not because it's edgy, but because of what it's saying. It's mean, it's filthy, but weirdly, it's also better made than a lot of its extreme horror cousins. There's control behind the chaos, which somehow makes this all worse. And hey, if Atroz doesn't break you, well, let's talk about that one movie that always ends up in the same conversation as it. Yeah, we're going there. Because if there's one title that's become synonymous with disturbing cinema, it's a Serbian Film. If you've never seen it, you've probably heard the name whispered in horror forums, Reddit threads, or late night pub conversations that go, wait, you haven't heard of? And honestly, you probably wish you hadn't. Released in 2010 and banned in multiple countries, A Serbian Film is arguably the most infamous entry in the extreme horror canon. It's not just disturbing, it's culturally radioactive. A movie that's been dissected, protested, memed, and mythologized to the point where it doesn't even feel real anymore. And hey, look, if you haven't heard the tale of this one, then let's get you up to speed. One last time. The film follows a retired porn star who's lured into one last job, only to find himself trapped in a nightmare of sexual violence, manipulation, and moral annihilation. The film escalates into territory so vile, so morally bankrupt, it sparked outrage across the globe. The infamous scenes in this movie, and if you know, you know, have turned this one from a film into a cultural event, something you survive. Defenders of the movie, including the director himself, will tell you that it's political, that it's a brutal allegory for post-war Serbia, a country traumatized, exploited, chewed out by its leader. However, a lot of others argue it isn't this deep. It's shallow, a superficial shock piece wrapped in faux political excuses, a film that wants to be profound but somehow ends up feeling like something your nihilistic 14-year-old cousin would write. Either way, it's very hard to forget and still holds the title as the most infamous disturbing horror movie. But that doesn't mean there aren't others who have tried to give a Serbian film a run for its money. In fact, some even tried decades before. Seriously, if a Serbian film is the most infamous modern disturbing movie, then this next one might be one of the originals. Guinea Pig, Flower of Flesh and Blood is pretty much a circus sideshow of gore. A young Japanese woman is abducted, drugged, and then slowly dismembered while still alive. Piece by piece. This is all done by a man in samurai armor who believes he's creating art. That's the whole movie. No real plot, no character arcs, just ultra close-up butchery in clinical detail. And honestly, the effects are kind of impressive, especially given the film came out in 1985. The thing was so convincing at the time that it sparked a now famous panic when Charlie Sheen allegedly saw a bootleg copy and contacted the FBI, convinced it was a real snuff film. That story, whether true or not, has helped mythologize the movie. It gave it weight, made it the kind of thing you hear about before you ever see it. But here's the truth, if you see modern gore, Flower of Flesh and Blood might not really disturb you. I mean, it's cold, detached, grotesque, yes, but weirdly kind of flat. But more like a director showing off the cool practical effects he's using. A showreel, if you will. Honestly, Mermaid in a Manhole, another Guinea Pig entry, might be the better movie. It's sadder, weirder, it has this decay and hallucinatory quality that gets under your skin. But Flower is the one that built the brand. It's the reason the Guinea Pig series has the reputation it does, and for that alone it definitely earns a place as one of the most disturbing horror movies ever made. And yeah, we've said it before, disturbing can mean something very different for each individual person. And if I had to choose one horror theme that absolutely wrecks me, disturbs me to the bone, it's cannibalism. I mean, I can sit through gore, I can sit through sadism, but the second we get into human flesh being eaten, I'm out. I'm a vegan for Pete's sake. So yeah, Cannibal Holocaust was never gonna sit right with me. And yet somehow here we are, talking about one of the most disturbing films ever made. Because for better or worse, this thing was kind of a blueprint. Released in 1980 and directed by Ruggero Deodato, this one's often cited as the original found footage horror. But unlike modern found footage movies, this one doesn't deal in shaky cam ghost or cursed tapes. It deals in animal cruelty, colonial violence, and filmed on location brutality so extreme that the director was literally arrested for suspected murder. That's not a myth. That happened. The story follows a group of American documentary filmmakers who head into the Amazon and never return. When a rescue team recovers their footage, what it shows is worse than anything imagined. The big twist is that the filmmakers weren't innocent. They staged the scenes, provoked attacks, committed sexual violence against the very people they were documenting. There's a moment where they butcher a real turtle, another where a monkey is decapitated, all for real. The camera lingers so there's no cutaway. I mean, I just found this beyond unsettling. I mean, sure, it was the 80s, sure, this was meant to make a point, but I don't care what your message is. If you have to murder animals on camera to get it across, you failed. But others still debate the intent. Some say it's a genius critique of media exploitation, that the real savages aren't the tribes but the white documentarians who try to exploit them for footage, but others just say it's exploitation hiding behind a weak moral excuse, that it wants to eat its cake and film it too. Either way, it's messy, it's vile, and it's infamous for a reason. But not all horror movies have to go that far in real life to disturb you. No, some can just crawl inside your brain and rot there. Kind of like the next movie we're going to talk about, Possum. So let me be real with you, this one could mess you up in a completely different way. After all the depravity and carnage that we've covered, Possum doesn't show much. This is one of the most bleak, suffocating British horror films you'll ever sit through. It's quiet, it's slow, but it's also deeply, psychologically fucked. Possum is a slow, grim descent into trauma, guilt, and the kind of childhood horror that never really leaves you. It follows Philip, a disgraced children's puppeteer, who returns to his childhood home with a brown leather bag. And inside the bag, the single most nightmarish puppet you've ever seen. No joke, fuck that puppet. This is one of those movies where people will say it's all symbolism, but make no mistake, the abuse here is real. I mean, the movie doesn't spell it out in dialogue, but it doesn't have to. The imagery does the talking. The way Philip recoils from human contact, the constant flashbacks to the woods, isolation, or the way the puppet stalks him like a parasitic memory. And above all, the hands. There's a scene where the uncle forces his fingers into Philip's mouth. It's one of the most upsetting, violating moments in this film, in horror as a whole, because it's not exaggerated. It's invasive in a way that only survivors of abuse will instantly recognize. This is one of the most psychologically disturbing films ever made, not because of what it shows, but because of what it knows. But sometimes horror isn't always surreal or symbolic. Sometimes it's real, and while a few films on this list have already blurred the line between reality and fiction, this next one did it while freaking out an entire generation of TikTok users. Megan is Missing. What starts as a low-budget cautionary tale about internet safety quickly spirals into one of the most relentlessly upsetting third acts in horror. Not because of the gore, but because of how far it's willing to go, and who it's willing to hurt. The film depicts teenage girls, actual minors during filming, in situations that feel less like horror storytelling and more like someone's personal obsession. The performances are raw because, well, the actors were barely older than the characters. 17 and apparently crying on set, put in real torture devices. Apparently one of the leads wept when she realised what she was reenacting after the director showed her the original photos it was based on. That is harmful, that is fucking disturbing, and for all the wrong reasons. This is what makes Megan is Missing so controversial. For some it plays like a PSA twisted into a nightmare, for others it crosses a moral line into exploitation, delivering trauma with no catharsis. But hey, Megan is Missing got his time in the spotlight after going viral on TikTok. But it's not actually the newest movie on our list. No, there are definitely more and more depraved movies releasing every year. While we considered Red Rooms and When Evil Lurks, we normally settled on a subgenre in and of itself. A zombie movie. The Sadness. Yeah, I know, it's not technically zombies, but come on. This is viciously nihilistic horror, the kind that stares you down and dares you to keep on watching. Set in Taiwan, the film imagines a viral outbreak that doesn't kill or zombify, it liberates. Inhibitions vanish, but the infected are still fully aware. They know what they are doing, and they want to do it. Murder, rape, cannibalism, necrophilia, it's all here, and it's all portrayed with a level of hyperrealism that feels designed to break you. And that eye scene, oh my god, that eye scene. If you know, you know. If you don't, just understand this. It's the kind of visual that gets seared into your brain. But perhaps the most disturbing thing about The Sadness isn't the gore, it's the tone. There's no catharsis, no moral lesson, no relief, but just cruelty for its own sake. A world where dehumanization is the norm and violence is pleasure, not punishment. You leave this film feeling unclean. And yeah, for those curious about the darker edges of extreme cinema, The Sadness might actually be one of the more accessible entry points, a gateway into something far bleaker than most mainstream horror dares to touch. People online don't just mention it, they warn each other about it. So yeah, from art house atrocities to viral nightmares, these films push the very limits of what horror can be and what audiences can stomach. Whether it's the trauma of Megan is Missing, the depravity of MD Pope, or the apocalyptic despair of The Sadness, one thing is clear. Disturbing doesn't always mean gory. Sometimes it means what you don't see. Sometimes it means what you can't unsee. But now it's your turn. What did we miss? What film broke you? What scenes still haunt your brain? Leave it all in the comments, or better, dare us to cover it in part 2. This is Oddly Horrific, where we don't just watch horror, we dissect it. Thank you for surviving with us. I've been Connor, and I'm off for a shower.